Okay, so let me go back and revise a bit. So, in terms of homologous organs, which was a part of comparative anatomy and morphology, so we had looked at the structural aspect of these particular organs. They are very much same, or they are similar at least, but functionally they are drastically different. And like, just a simple example of this was the wing of the bat with the hand, right? These two are totally different structures. Also, in terms of homology of the heart, we had seen how it developed from a two-chambered heart to three-chambered, and then to a completely developed four-chambered heart, which is present in most of the mammals. Also, some of the mouth parts which were like similar earlier, but they have differentiated later over the time to become a specific mouth part of a particular organism. So these were the different examples, and also in case of plants, we had seen one such example. Now, and of course, we had looked at the types of homology based on what are they falling under. Now we will be looking at the analogous organs. So analogous organs, these will perform the same function, right? In case of homologous, they did not perform the same function. These analogous organs, they perform the same function and have almost similar appearances. But most important thing is they develop in totally different groups, and they are different in the fundamental structure itself, right? Again, so homologous and analogous organs, they are completely opposite that way. So analogous organs, they will perform the same functions, but they have different structure, different basic structure, what we call it. They are developed from the evolutionary process through the adaptations of distantly related organisms. So over the time, and that is when this land pattern kind of thing comes into picture. If a particular organism which was present throughout the landscape, and if the land pattern got separated or the continents got separated, these organisms, they will develop independently, though they were earlier their ancestors, they were common, but over the time they become very distantly related when they adapt to a particular situation. And again, this is the process that I am talking millions of years, uh, considering those many years. So that way, these organisms, they are distantly related, but they develop the particular structure which are similar in terms of function, and that happens through the process of adaptation. So analogy is the superficial similarity in appearance. Superficial similarity, that means just by look of it, it will look similar between the organs of different animal groups, and because they carry the same function. And the simplest example is, like, if we can take the wings of the butterfly to the wings of the bird or the wings of the bat. Now these two are drastically different, but ultimately what they do is, in terms of function, they help particular organism to fly. So that way, functionally they are same, but structurally they are drastically different. Also, this is this second one, wing of pterodactyl. This was one of the ancestral species which is extinct, uh, and this was like kind of in between, again, reptiles and aves, right? So that way, this had a structure of its wing like this. This is only half part of the wing which is shown. You might have seen something like this, yeah, as a like a dinosaur wing. So something like that is this pterodactyl wing. And then there is this wing of a bird, which is a regular bird which we see mostly, and this is the wing of the bat. And if you look at them, they are structurally totally different, but at the end they do the same function. And this particular example is an example of convergent evolution. Convergent evolution means they were different species, but at the end they are doing a same function, and their structure, it somehow resembles to each other, like in terms of this is a butterfly wing or insect wing to that of bat wing. So that way they are looking similar, and they are drastically different organism or distantly related organism, and that's what is convergent evolution. So this was one example of the analogy of the wings. Then similarly, there is analogy of body shapes. For example, this ichthyosaur or eel or fish and whale, different organisms. They have they have a typical body shape which is cylindrical, right? Sizes can vary again, and also like a whale is a mammal, fish is a Pisces, eel and ichthyosaur, they will fall into the same category of vertebrate and so on. So that way, these organisms, they have certain basic structure which looks similar, but again, the functions of the whole body, like why does a whale has a huge body compared to a fish or compared to a eel, it's like a drastically different things. So that way, they are analogous in terms of body shape, but they have different functions. Similarly, there is this analogy of fins of fish and the flippers of the whale. So again, they look similar, but they have they have same function, but they look wise they are drastically different. And also they are developed at like a very distantly related species. One of the very interesting thing is the analogy of the potato and the sweet potato. Now, because they are just called potato, we can't put them together. But potato is actually the modified stem, and sweet potato is modified root. Earlier, these two, like obviously stem and root, these are distinctly two different parts. One is modified stem, and the other one is modified root. So that way, the look wise, they and both of them contain starch or carbohydrate type of compound, and they are little starchy and so on. So that way, they are same, but structurally they are drastically different. One is stem and the other one is root, I mean modified part. Also, the leaves of the plant or the cladode of the ruscus. Now, these are again analogous in the sense, by look wise, they would look similar, but they have drastically different function. Leaves obviously do the photosynthesis, and cladode, it just the kind of means of avoiding the what we say, the transpiration process, also to protect the organism. So that way, these organs, they will look different. Rather, they will look somewhat similar, but functionally, they may be same or maybe different. And this is just the example of that flipper of, or the wings of the fish. If you look structurally, that is structurally completely different. But if you look externally, you will think that it will have the same function, which is ultimately true, but then structurally, which is drastically different structure. So this is, I guess that's all. Yeah, that's all about the analogy and the analogous organ. So only thing that you need to remember is this part, like mainly this part. Remember the difference between homologous and analogous structure. Again, I'm not going to go into these differences. You can read it on your own, but the examples you should know. Do you have any question here in terms of analogy? Okay. Now, so then we will move on to the next small part. So again, we are looking at the evidences from morphology and anatomy from different organisms. This is an evidence to prove that particular evolutionarily conservation or evolutionarily structures, they are either similar or different, or functionally similar or different, either ways. So The vestigial organs, these are one of the very interesting structure that has been present within the most of the organisms, I would say. So these are rudimentary or poorly developed organs. Poorly developed means either incompletely developed or not fully functional. Or the body parts that are non-functional or useless to the possessor. Whosoever has it, they are useless to them, but were functional in the ancestors. So whichever ancestral species that these organisms they are developed from, in those ancestors, these vestigial organs, rather currently they are vestigial. In the ancestral species, they were very, very functional. And in the ancestral species, they are fully developed and function in related forms. So that is what is vestigial organs. So if we look at the vestigial organ in man, there is a presence of nictitating membrane, which is the third eyelid. I don't know how many of you have heard this before, but at the corner of the eye structure, like there is upper eyelid, there is lower eyelid, and at the inner corner, you will see a kind of slight slanting membrane just at the corner. That is what is third eyelid. So I guess let me show you this part. Uh, Nictitating membrane. So, for example, this one. Yeah. It's also called as plica semilunaris. So this part you see, it's little slanting, which is inside. This is the upper eyelid, this is the lower eyelid, and in between them from the side, there is this third eyelid. So that is what is called as nictitating membrane, or it's also called as plica semilunaris. So, and it's also present in other species to some extent, but they again because we consider like all these species they are evolved from a common ancestor, so obviously these structures they are kind of present in some species and absent in others. So that is nictitating membrane or third eyelid or plica semilunaris. Then ear muscles, which are also called as auricular muscles to move pinna. So if you look at this particular part above the ear, that is outside the skull, and behind the ear, these muscles they are developed or they are still there in the human being to move the pinna. Pinna is this outermost ear or the outer part of the ear. So if like in the earlier species, if you know, to listen to the sound, they were able to move their pinna to different directions. Like it still happens with dog or cat kind of animals. So that ability is like almost lost. It is not so functional in human, but yeah, still like due to some training or so, some people they are able to move their pinna also. But yeah, that is still a vestigial organ in human, or it's also called as auricular muscles or ear muscles. Then pointed canines. In some of the cases, you might have seen the extra growth of teeth, or even the ones that we have as such pointed canines, if they grow more like how they are present in canine species or canidae species like dog or fox or so on. So that is an example of vestigial organ. Now you might wonder that because human species is omnivorous, and these omnivorous species like omnivorous means carnivorous as well as herbivorous. So that omnivorous would need some amount of what we say, if we are eating a meat, then these canines would be required. But we don't go and feed onto animals. So that way the canines they are useless. Of course, it has certain function, but that's not completely required in the human being. Same is the case with the wisdom teeth. Like they developed at the end of, like, let's say 23, 24 years of the age, which is like not at all required, and they don't have any specific function as such. We have molars and premolars and like canines, and I don't know what was the last one, something. So these number of teeth or these structure, they are good enough for us to make our food digestible. So wisdom teeth as such, they are not required. Also, one of the very interesting thing that you would know is this vermiform appendix. Now, if you know, this vermiform appendix is coming to us from the herbivorous animals, because it earlier species, it had the ability to digest the cellulose kind of component, which happens in most of the cattle type of organism. Like currently, it still happens. So that appendix or that additional structure which was present at the end of intestine, it has like reduced drastically in size, which is still present, what we call as simply appendix. Vermiform it is called as because it's like a worm-like. That's what is vermiform. So it's that appendix structure, it's still present at the end of large intestine, and that is non-functional, so it is not required in human beings. But in the earlier species from which we are developed, like again many millions of years ago, that those species, they needed this structure, and from there it is coming to us, which is non-functional at the moment. Again, this mamma, or it's also called as mammary glands in short, in males, that is not required. Like obviously males, they don't lactate as such. So in those cases, these mamma, they are not required, or like the mammary glands are not required, and they don't have any function as such, but they are still present in males. Similarly, clitoris or clitoris. Yes, Pratham.
Uh, One second. I didn't see the volume. Yeah. So am I clear? Am I more clear now?
Yeah,
So like, what function did it serve before mammary glands in males?
it doesn't serve any function. That's why it is vestigial.
So like, it should have served a purpose earlier, right? Then it became vestigial afterwards.
Yeah, because males and females, like if you look at the earliest species, hermaphrodites, they were like they had both the sexes, right? That's the common ancestor. And over the time, when this male and female got separated, that's when this probably mammary glands, they still stayed with the males.
Okay, so like that was a very very long time ago, right? When the common ancestor was a hermaphrodite. So
Yeah,
it's still remaining from that time.
correct. And it
Okay.
has no function in males. Like we know it literally has no function.
Do like the other animals also have this?
Uh, Not necessarily. Not all the organisms, they have it in. Uh, like what I guess, I don't remember to see it in dogs or any other species, or maybe I haven't observed it so clearly. But I doubt if it is present in most of the species, most of the other species.
So, but like most of them should have it, right? Like because of the common ancestor.
Idea, no, not necessarily should
Like
have.
it
They
can't be that all of them lost it except humans, right?
But then it's very much possibility that most of these species, they have lost it over the time due to the adaptation or due to the changes in the body structure.
Yes, sir. But like humans are more evolved, right? So like
Uh,
humans are like one of the like
I would
towards the
say
end of
humans
the
are
evolution.
complex rather than more evolved. Humans are more complex.
So like as in more evolved, I mean they came much later after evolving. Like the other species were there for quite some time earlier, right?
So I mean, there that is still debatable, because just few months back I was reading an article. Uh, there are quite a few species, like even when we talk of dolphin and whale and stuff like that, they are, I mean, they are like scientists, they are considering these species are far more evolved than human. But again, that's like I said, it's debatable topic.
So but like dolphins and whales, they came a long time ago, right? Like 50 million,
Yeah,
their common ancestor. but ours is very new, relatively, like Homo sapiens, like very new.
Yes, but then if you go back to all those Homo, what we say, genus or the species within the Homo genus, right? We are like evolved from them ultimately, so we can't discard them as such. And considering that part, if a particular species is evolved in a short span of time to this level, then the human evolution over the more amount of time is not that great. And that's when I said scientists, they are looking at which species they are more evolved. Is it human or is it someone else?
So more involved as in,
Evolved in terms of all the functions of the body that we have.
so who's better suited to the environment?
Yeah,
So that'd be human, of course, right?
no, that's what we consider it human. Do we know everything about the other species? We
So
don't.
like the who is more suited to the environment, you can find out solely from natural selection, right? Because that's the purpose of evolution in an environment, right? Natural selection.
Exactly my
And
point.
and if you win natural selection, I mean,
No,
then you can say that your evolution is so like they say now, the one with the better evolution will live or will like, and the one with the bad evolution will die.
that
Right?
is true.
And since humans can hunt any other animal, that means that they have the best selection, right? I mean, that's how the hierarchy works, right?
No, that is what I'm trying to say. We are saying this because we know our self as well as our surrounding very well. But do we know the same scenario with the other animals or other species? We don't. How much have we studied, let's say again, of these dolphins or whales or any other species? We haven't studied them much.
So, like, it's like not about studying. It's like if humans can easily hunt dolphins and dolphins can't easily hunt humans, then that means that like if you see evolution in that way, that for the survival of the fittest, that means humans are more evolved, right?
Just because we have brain. Yes.
No, not brain. It's like it's the ability. So brain is a perk that you can use, but all the perks combined, like to give the max output. You get it? So like what I'm trying to say, like if you
It's
combine all the perks, and well, human like the brain is a perk. So
right.
and if you see the output, humans can give the best output, right?
No, that is true. But again, that is subject to the environment. What we are talking is in terms of only human context. If we think in terms of nature or environment, humans, they have been the most destructible species. So how can we call it as evolution? It's probably the other species who are existing in nature, they have been the most protective and they have been developing the ecosystem. And we are the ones who have been disturbing the ecosystems. So, should we call human as a most evolved organism?
So, but like conserving the ecosystem is not like a aim of
Well, that
evolution.
is the whole purpose of creating a nature or environment. No, it is not just the prosperous nature of one of these species. Is like building the whole ecosystem altogether. That will be the one of the highly evolved species.
Yes, so like that's nature's job, right? Like for an evolution, like for a species, the main job, like the main target for a species is like to reproduce and get higher on the food chain, right? By developing more like better ways, like you
Hmm.
know, abilities. Like for nature, like for the environment, all like all the species combined, all of them do that and they keep each other in balance. But like for a single species, their main concern is themselves, right? And not protecting other life forms.
No, but see, that is what we consider as being human. But the nature doesn't consider that part. That's when I said, like, the few of the researchers, they are kind of discarding this theory of survival of fittest. or even to some extent the natural selection. There have been quite a lot of research these days which is happening, especially these lot of environmentalists, they are coming up with the lot of research work that they are doing separately. And it goes back to the fact that the humans, they have been most destructible species for Earth, which is the living habitat, right? And if this continues in the similar manner, one day the Earth will be rendered without any living organism on this space, on this planet. So that will happen if this continues, and that is when, like my question is, do we consider ourselves as highly evolved species, or we don't know others and that's why we consider this, or are we the most destructible species? So maybe we have to ask these questions.
So, like that's the question. Yes, of course, we are the most destructible. But how does that relate to being evolved or not? Like, even if some person is like, even if some species is not evolved, they might do destructive things. And if they're evolved also, they might do destructive things. Just that the scale may vary.
So that is what I'm saying. No, the concept of uh, uh, being highly evolved itself comes from the fact that, are we surviving with the ecosystem, or are we just surviving ourselves? If we are just surviving by ourselves, I wouldn't call it that as a part of like we are evolved. It just we are surviving. But when we say we are evolved, imagine, no, if the other species they go extinct and only human survive. Again, a very hypothetical situation. Human will become like what we say, cannibalism. They would go to the extent of cannibalism. So that is not evolution. That will, we can call it as a part of adaptation, because ultimately human would feed on a human, right? That's what cannibalism is. But then that's not evolution. That's actually going down the drain and disturbing the whole of the ecosystem. So that way I'm saying it's not really like we can't call it completely evolved or highly evolved at least, but we can surely call it like we are the most adaptable species. That is surely true.
So evolved in the biological sense, like this is all in the kind of in the philosophical sense, right? Like you're evolved, so you have some sense. Like, what does the biological evolved, the definition say?
That's what I'm saying. Again, then I will go
So
back to
you're saying that the definition is being argued upon right now.
and also because we don't know much of the function. Like let's say if like we consider dolphin as one of the intelligent organism, but do we know the every function of that dolphin's brain, which might have more brain capacity, like much higher brain capacity than the human beings?
Sir,
And
it does so.
so exactly my point.
Sir,
And
it has more folds. The dolphin's brain, it has more folds. Like if you've seen folds, it's the second smartest in the animal kingdom. Like the first is elephant.
yeah, so that way it's like we don't know completely yet, and then we still consider ourselves as very highly evolved. Yes, structurally we might be better in terms of, because we have developed certain things over the time, right? We have all the systems in place. We have a good brain to think about. So all of this is perfectly fine. Okay, so that was the mammary glands in males. The another structure that is present in female is this clitoris or clitoris. Now that is just an what we call as feel good organ in females, or it's a kind of an organ with pleasure that gives lot of pleasure to the female. So that way it doesn't have any function. Pleasure is not an activity that body needs as such, right? It is more of a like social and emotional sort of aspect, but in terms of organ and function, it is not required, and that is why it is a vestigial organ in female.
So, but isn't it like, can't it cause sexual excitement? And isn't that a major like function?
Again,
Because,
so
yeah,
then the point is, uh, sexual activity or sexual intercourse is not for pleasure, it is for reproduction, right?
yes, sir. But
We have converted into means of pleasure, or rather we use it as means of pleasure. So that is not the natural course of action. I wouldn't say it's unnatural or something like that, but it was not what it was meant for.
sir, no, I'm saying that pleasure is, it's not separate from reproduction. So it's one of the things that kind of make people reproduce. So like if there was no pleasure, then surely the reproduction would get less, right?
Exactly.
But so like it's one of the factors that contributes to reproduction. So like it is a major, it's a factor.
No,
So
but
it plays an important role.
so that was the controlling factor, no, because it was not means of pleasures in the other species. Their population is still very much under control. In human, because it has changed into something else from the reproduction to pleasurable activity, that's when the human population is growing quite a lot.
Yes, sir. So like shouldn't we say that it's such a major factor that in reproduction that it has bloomed the population so much, because people
But
are doing this and they're reproducing, right? So shouldn't it be a like part of the reproductive system?
no, that is not. There is no function of clitoris as such in the reproduction process.
Yes,
Pleasure.
sir. Like in humans, like in males also, like you get a excitement of pleasure, right?
Yes, but then that is what I'm trying to say. It's not a part of reproduction, it's just part of pleasure. It does
So
not.
it has evolved to be like it has evolved to be a factor, right? It doesn't it has not separately evolved. It has evolved along with reproduction to be a factor.
Correct.
So it's a part of it.
It's a part, correct, but then it still has no function.
No, like that's what I'm saying. The function is reproduction. Like there are many parts in the reproductive organ like system, right? There are many organs. So this is one of the functions, like whatever enzymes or hormones are released.
No, exactly my point. There is no function apart from the pleasure or apart from like generating very that highly sensuous orgasm. There is no function. It does not lead to any secretion or so on. All these activities that happen uh, throughout the sexual intercourse, they have certain function. These what we call as orgasm or what we call as sensuous pleasure and stuff, they don't have any function. That is like it's a feel good factor for both male as well as female. Whether you talk of the penis or whether you talk of the this clitoris in female, these both they are just like the part of that feel good factor. They do not have any function.
So, like for other animals, there is an instinct to reproduce, right?
There is instinct.
To reproduce.
uh,
Like, why do the other animals populate?
because they have to reproduce.
Yeah, no, they don't have to reproduce. It's like this. So, like most animals, they don't have consciousness like humans, right? So they can't really think like that. That oh, if I don't reproduce, my species will die out. So, like an individual doesn't care about the species because they can't think that way. They don't have the capacity. So instinctively, they reproduce because of some reason.
Yeah, we can say that.
Yes, and that reason is absent in humans. because humans can think consciously, they don't instinctively have that reason, but like one of the, because they don't instinctively have that reason, that they just go and reproduce. Pleasure becomes an important reason to reproduce.
No, but that is what I'm trying to say, no, Pratham. It's like these two things are drastically different. They just happen to be involved in one activity, that is
Like
reproduction.
that's what I'm saying. Is like it's like I think that like it can't be that way, right? I think that it's purposefully put in that. So while human reproduction or something, like in the ancestors, maybe when it was evolving, they like purposefully use resources to put some points into pleasure so that it becomes more feasible.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel it means like if we remove, let's say, these nerve endings at the clitoris or even at the glans penis in male as well as female, I guess still the reproduction will happen the way it was happen. It wouldn't change anything. And even if you remove that pleasure part, it will still happen.
Certain happen, but it greatly reduced, right? The number of people who
That is what
reproduce.
the control factor, the natural control factor has to be there. And because of this only, probably the one of the worst, like these rape cases and stuff like that, that is evolving. It's like worst thing. But yeah, anyway, so all said and done that. So that is still a vestigial organ in because we have to write this in the exam. You can't say, you can't debate there in the exam. So that is one. Then the next one is the caudal vertebrate, or what we call as coccyx. Now this, the last tailbone portion, it doesn't have any function as such, at least in the human. So that is a vestigial organ. Abdominal muscles, surprisingly this was a new thing for me as well. I didn't know these abdominal muscles, they are vestigial organ, which I still kind of doubt, but it's specifically talking of the abs and not any other abdominal muscles. So if you look in this diagram, these muscles that they are showing within the abdominal region, it is vestigial organ. And we,
But isn't that for protection?
sorry,
Isn't that for protection and
for
for like?
protection, we have all the different structures already in place. So below these
But
abdominal muscles, there are other layers of muscles which are good enough.
so, but doesn't it serve a lot of functions?
No,
Like, but one of them is running. So you can run faster if your abdominal muscles are built, because
core strength of the organism is not because of the abdominal muscles itself, but it's rather the whole of the core itself.
so, but isn't a like the abdominal muscles a big part of the core? I mean, so many people they build abs, right? Like they purposefully build abs, and they do get stronger.
No, that is what I'm saying. Like earlier days, if you would have seen, the human being was much stronger compared to what we are now.
But they had a body, they had a different body shape, right? They had a different structure of bones.
Correct.
If you see the same structure, a person who has built only abs and a person who hasn't, the person who has built abs will be stronger.
No, that is our concept of being stronger, because we think that having a very fit and fine muscular structure, that is what is the stronger thing.
No, no,
Of
as in,
course, with
like,
biceps, triceps,
no, not only biceps and triceps, sir. Like if you have a stronger core, you can run faster.
but that you can do it without abdominal muscles as well. You have other what we call as oblique muscles and so
Yes,
on.
sir. Yes, sir. So you can build those, but you can also build abdominal muscle. So it's not vestigial. It's like if there are 2 years. So let's say 1 year is vestigial. You lose 1 year, but you can still listen from the other, right? But that doesn't make sense. Like that 2 years and both, like, so if you build both of them, you'll be even stronger. Like the leg muscles and the core. So it's a part of the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, quite possibly. And that's when I said it is like a surprise to me. I didn't know this fact earlier at all. But yeah, we can go on about it.
So like so many people build them. If you say that they are vestigial, then
Yeah, I know. Just yesterday, Mr. Siddharth Gupta, who entered my dorm, he started flexing about his muscles. So, yeah. But anyway, so that is one. Uh, I don't know how you want to take it, but from the exams perspective, I guess we have to stick by the fact that it is vestigial. And yeah, we might want to debate about it later. Anyway.
so like is it possible that it served a different purpose earlier, but now it has become vestigial in that sense, and now it serves a different purpose?
Not at least in the human species, because in the earlier species the amount of or rather the number of muscular structure, they were drastically different. If you look at the shape of any of the other species, like human ancestor, I mean, they were like much more bulkier, I would say, compared to what we are now. Bulkier and also differently organized. Like if you look at only the shoulder part, this was much thicker compared to or even the chimpanzees and other ape category. They are like so different. So I don't know if it had a different function altogether. But yeah, so that is one. And the hair coat on the body as such, yeah, of course, again here also we can debate about it, that it has a function of protecting or maintaining the temperature within the skin and so on. But as such, it is still a on the skin, especially on the body part like chest hair or pubic hair, they don't have much of these functions, or the armpit hair and so on. So that I don't think it has any function as such. Body hair you can still uh, debate about, but these other parts of the like the growth of the hair at specific regions, these are surely doesn't have any function. So that is the vestigial organ in man. How much time do we have? 52. Okay, let's finish this part. Then there are vestigial organs in other animals. For example, splint bones in the horse limbs. So horse, they have a kind of splint bone. Let me show that to you, because splint bones in horses. So this is a kind of attachment. You can see it here. This smaller bone which is present here, it is more clear. You can see it here. So that is called a splint bone, and which is present in the limb, and that is specially like just a kind of supporting, not even a supporting structure. It just developed over the time. Like we also have two bones, but then we don't have much of the common ancestry as such. Uh, so that way, this spleen bone becomes vestigial organ. Though it is being debated there also, it helps in like letting the horse run faster. But that is like I don't know too much about it. So that is one part, splint bones. Vestiges of the hind limbs and the pelvic girdles, especially in the python and the sand boas. So these are like sand boas. I'm not sure if you have heard of them. Python, surely you would know. These sand boas, let me show it to you. Uh, so these are the sand boas. These are like a typical snake-like. I'm not sure. Some of these species, they are non-venomous, and these are like not so commonly found as well. These are like rare of those species, at least in this terrain of the Sahyadri that I know. And so these vestiges of the uh, hind limb, uh, especially in python. So that has, so these hind limb, they are almost gone. I don't know, this is this python. Not really, actually. I'm not too sure where is that diagram. But at the last part of the body of this python, they have this. I am not sure if this is again a python, but yeah, something like this. If you see this part, small bone attached to the pelvic girdle, yeah, this one, yeah, this one, the white part that you are seeing at the end, they will have a kind of this vertebral column, and at the end, which was supposed to be developed as the hind limb, they have this small vestigial organ present in them, which doesn't have any function as such in python, because they are these reptile crawling creatures. So that way, that is the vestigial part in the python and even in the sand boas. The wings and feathers of the flightless birds like ostrich, again that's a vestigial because they can't just fly. Or vestigial eyes, or eyes covered with the fold of a membrane. For example, in cavefish they have eyes but they are totally blind. They can't see anything, but they still have eyes. So that becomes a vestigial eye structure for those animals. So that is the case with the vestigial organ in some animals. Now, in case of plants, the scale leaves of Ruscus. So whatever structure we had seen, that is considered as a vestigial. And I remember I was mentioning about it may or may not do the function of photosynthesis. But in this case, if we think in terms of vestigial organ, then surely it doesn't do any part of photosynthesis. But I still feel that if it has certain cells which contains chlorophyll, which then that is naturally bound to do the function of photosynthesis. But like as per this statement, I don't think it is involved in any function as such. And also the underground stem. Underground stem will not perform any function as such, apart from the supporting, which is the upper part of the stem does. The underground stem wouldn't have any function. Cutinized stomata in the cacti. Cutinized is the presence of cutin at the stomatal region, and that is what is present in the cactus. Now, if it is stomata, its function is to transpire or to allow the exchange of gases. But if it is cutinized, then obviously it is not performing any function. That is like kind of covering with the cutin layer, and that will not have any function. Also, this rudimentary flagella in the cycad sperms. Now, cycad sperms, this is again a kind of this pteridophytes. Cycad tree, you would know for sure this tree, and it has this kind of what we say sperms, which is the male gamete. And when these male gametes they are released, these are like naked seeds, right? So in that case, these flagella-like structures are present, which is like a hair-like growth in their sperms, which does not have any function, because those trees they might undergo a kind of pollination and so on. But that flagella as such in the cycad sperm does not have any functions, and that becomes a part of vestigial organ.
No, like why would a tree develop sperms in the first place?
It's not, the sperm doesn't literally mean a sperm there. It just the male gamete, that's what is called a sperm.
Okay, so it's like a pollen.
Yeah, it's like a pollen. Okay, so that is all about the vestigial organs. We will stop here. In the next class, we will talk about this last part of a truism, or what is also called as reversion. This is another very interesting concept, which we might have seen in the news, like someone growing the hair all over the body like Hanuman and stuff like that. Like becoming or monkey like babies being born. So that is what is this reversion phenomenon. We'll see that in the next class. But yeah, for today we will stop, and then next these are the few more evidences that we'll talk of from the Darwin study and so on. Okay.